I was part of the team that searched for her that winter, combing through ridges and frozen valleys until our voices went hoarse, calling her name into the wind. We found her backpack torn open near a cliff edge, contents scattered across the snow like breadcrumbs leading nowhere. The storm had erased her footprints within hours, turning the mountain into a blank page that refused to tell us what it had witnessed. After 11 days, we packed our gear and descended, carrying the weight of another soul claimed by the wilderness. They train you to accept loss in search and rescue, to understand that nature keeps its secrets, and some people simply vanish into the vastness. But this one stayed with me differently, settling into my chest like a stone I couldn't cough up. I saw her face in my dreams for months afterward, imagined her final moments 1,000 different ways. The mountains had swallowed her whole, and we were left to carry only questions back to the world below. I moved on eventually, let the years smooth the rough edges of that failure into something I could live with. Other rescues came and went, some successful, some not, each one a reminder of how thin the line is between found and lost. I never expected to hear her name again, never imagined the mountains would give back what they'd taken, but 4 years later I received a call that would unravel everything I thought I understood about survival, solitude, and what watches us from the places we fear to go. The call came through dispatch on a grey afternoon. A pair of wildlife photographers reporting something impossible in an unmapped valley 3 ridges beyond where we'd given up searching. They spoke in fractured sentences, their voices tight with disbelief, describing a stone structure they'd found while tracking elk migration patterns. Inside, they said, was a woman matching the description of someone who should have been dead for 4 years, alive, but changed in ways they struggled to articulate over the static-filled radio. I drove through the night with 2 other team members, our headlights cutting through mountain darkness as doubt gnawed at my certainty. We hiked in at dawn, following coordinates that led us deeper into wilderness I thought I'd memorized, until the valley opened before us like a secret the mountains had been keeping. The hut appeared ancient and deliberate, built into the hillside with stone, fitted so precisely it seemed part of the landscape itself, as if the earth had chosen to shelter something precious within its bones. She sat near the entrance, wrapped in animal pelts, her frame gaunt, but her eyes possessing a clarity that stopped my breath in my throat. Recognition came slowly, her features sharpened by hardship into someone both familiar and utterly transformed, and when she looked at me, there was no relief or desperation, only a profound calm that felt older than the mountains surrounding us. She spoke my name as if from a great distance, then whispered about the watcher in the peaks, her voice carrying reverence, reserved for things beyond human understanding. The photographers stood apart, their cameras hanging forgotten around their necks, and I understood why they'd sounded so shaken on the radio. This wasn't a rescue anymore, but a recovery of something that had crossed a threshold we couldn't see, returning from a place where survival meant becoming something other than what we'd lost. The hospital became her cage, sterile and humming with fluorescent anxiety that made her flinch at every intercom chime and footstep in the corridor. She sat by the window for hours, pressing her palm against the glass as if trying to feel the wind she could only see moving through distant trees, her silence so complete that nurses began entering her room with visible hesitation. Doctors catalogued her physical recovery with clinical satisfaction, while noting in careful handwriting the psychological disconnect they couldn't diagnose, the way she startled at closeness but remained utterly calm during examinations that should have caused discomfort. Her family visited with tears and trembling hands, but she looked through them like they were memories she was trying to remember how to feel. In therapy sessions, she spoke haltingly about seasons passing in solitude, her words choosing themselves carefully, as if translated from a language that had no name for what she'd experienced. She described mornings waking to fresh water in carved stone bowls, The way frost patterns on the hut's entrance shifted to reveal pathways through the snow, signs she'd learned to read like scripture written in ice and shadow. The therapist leaned forward when she mentioned the presence beyond the walls, that patient enormity that never demanded but somehow taught, and I watched from behind the observation glass, as clinical skepticism warred with something harder to dismiss. Her calmness wasn't peace, but adaptation, the stillness of something that had learned to survive by becoming part of the wilderness itself. The night it happened returns in fragments, sharp enough to draw blood from memory. I was 3 days into a solo trek when the storm descended. Like divine punishment, visibility collapsing to arm's length as wind carved the air into weapons of ice. My headlamp died first, then the trail vanished beneath accumulating white, and when my boot found nothing but kong 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 emptiness, I fell into darkness so complete I couldn't tell which direction held the sky. The pain in my shattered leg arrived seconds after impact, white-hot and clarifying, followed by the knowing that comes when your body understands what your mind refuses. This is where the story ends. I don't remember deciding to stop fighting the cold that crept through my bones like slow-moving water. The blizzard howled its ancient song above my ravine tomb while I drifted between consciousness and something deeper. My last coherent thought, a strange gratitude that at least the mountains would keep me. Then the sound came, cutting through wind and resignation, footfalls so heavy they registered as vibration before noise, methodical and purposeful, growing closer until a shadow darker than the storm itself blocked out what little light remained. I tried to speak, but managed only a breath that crystallized in the air between us. What lifted me wasn't human hands, but something broader, stronger, impossibly gentle, despite the rough texture against my torn clothing. Through pain-narrowed vision, I glimpsed only mass and movement, caught the scent of earth and winter fur and something older than naming, felt warmth radiating from this being that carried me through the screaming wind as if I weighed nothing at all. Fear should have consumed me, but exhaustion or shock or perhaps some instinct deeper than civilization whispered that whatever held me had chosen rescue over easier options. I woke to stillness and stone walls, my leg bound in splits of carved wood, lashed with sinew, so precisely placed that the agony had diminished to manageable thunder. The hut measured perhaps 12 feet across, walls fitted from riverstone with gaps chinked by moss and clay, a smoke hole in the center of the roof that let in columns of pale light. Around me lay arrangements that spoke of intention, a bed of pine boughs and firs that held my scent, and something wilder, clay vessels filled with spring water, piles of roots and dried berries organized by type along the far wall. My breath caught when I noticed the entrance, a gap in the stones just large enough for my frame, deliberately too small for whatever had carried me here. I saw it first as movement in peripheral vision, a presence that existed in the threshold between inside and outside. When I turned my head, the shape would vanish, but I felt the weight of observation like pressure against my skin, heard breathing too deep and slow to belong to any animal I could name. At dawn and dusk it drew closest, and through the entrance gap I glimpsed fragments, a massive hand with fingers thick as branches, fur the color of storm clouds and stone, once the side of a face so human and yet so utterly not that my mind struggled to hold the image. The offerings appeared while I slept or turned away, placed just inside the threshold with care that bordered on reverence. Fresh meat, still warm from the kill, its portions sized for human consumption and cleanly separated from bone. Bundles of herbs I recognized from survival training I'd never fully trusted, now arranged in combinations that suggested specific purposes: healing, nourishment, sleep. My broken leg kept me prisoner those first weeks, but a stranger prison existed in my response to this guardian I couldn't face directly. Terror had burned through me initially, left behind something uncomfortably close to gratitude, and beneath that, a question that grew louder in the silence. What manner of being saves what it could easily consume? The teaching began. Without ceremony or announcement, revealed only through patterns I learned to recognize. When I crawled to the entrance for water, I found stones arranged in deliberate sequence, grey, white, leading to a cluster of plants I'd dismissed as decorative. That evening I crushed the leaves as the pattern suggested, mixed them with water, and felt my fever break for the first time in days. The creature had been watching me suffer, waiting for me to observe rather than panic. Weeks passed in this silent education, each lesson built upon watchfulness and trust. It would scrape bark from specific trees and leave the samples where I'd find them at dawn, always in combinations that suggested purpose. I learned to read weather in the arrangement of pine cones outside the entrance, to recognize which mushrooms appeared after rain, to understand that survival was a language written in the grammar of attention. My guard dog instincts as a hiker had taught me to conquer nature, but this being taught me to listen. The creature never entered my sanctuary, never imposed its massive presence into the space it had granted me. Yet I felt its proximity like a constant heartbeat in the earth, sensed when it watched from the ridge above or waited in the tree line during my fumbling attempts to walk again. It corrected my mistakes through absence and presence, allowing me to eat the wrong berry once, then appearing with the remedy before real harm could set in. One morning, I found my own reflection in the still water of a clay vessel and barely recognized the woman staring back, thinner, feral, alive in ways I'd never been in the world below. The creature had saved more than my body in that ravine. The loneliness didn't vanish. It transformed into something I'd never known in a city of millions. I began leaving small things at the threshold, a braid of grass, a stack of flat stones arranged like the lessons it had taught me, a carving I'd worked on for days with a sharp rock. Each morning they were gone, and in their place I'd find treasures that made my chest ache. A bundle of winter berries still on the branch, a pelt so soft it felt like forgiveness, once even wildflowers that had no business blooming in that cold. I started speaking aloud during those endless twilight hours, whispering my history to the darkness beyond the entrance, my failed relationships, my father's funeral I'd missed for a trail. Summit, the profound emptiness I'd been climbing mountains to escape. The creature never responded with sound, but I swear the quality of silence changed, became receptive, patient, like the earth itself was holding space for confessions I'd never offered another human soul. On the coldest nights I heard it settling against the outer wall, felt the vibration of its breathing through ancient stone. I would press my palm flat against the rock and imagine I felt warmth there, this impossible bond between woman and legend. We were both exiles in our way, I realized, me lost to the world below, it hidden from a species that would destroy what it couldn't categorize. When spring finally cracked the ice, I understood with terrible clarity that I wasn't sure I wanted to be found. The second winter broke something fundamental inside me. I woke one morning to find my hands wouldn't stop shaking, my breath coming in sobs that turned to screams I'd suppressed for months. I stumbled outside into knee-deep snow, ready to walk into the white nothing, and let the cold finish what the fall had started. I wanted the silence to be permanent. That's when I saw it fully for the first time, standing 20 yards away in complete daylight, towering, covered in silver-brown hair matted with ice, shoulders broad as the mountain itself. But it was the eyes that shattered me, ancient and golden and filled with such profound sorrow that I understood instantly it had watched others surrender to despair. It had witnessed centuries of suffering and chosen mercy every time. It didn't approach, didn't reach for me. It simply lowered itself to sit in the snow, mirroring my collapse, and waited. We stayed like that as the sun crossed the sky, two creatures who'd lost everything, choosing to remain anyway. The message was wordless but absolute. Your survival matters even when you can't remember why. When I finally limped back inside, I found a circle of stones arranged by the entrance, and in the center, a single evergreen branch, still green against all odds. The next morning I woke with purpose. Instead of panic, it had shown me that existence itself was the defiance, the victory, the point. The investigators spread my journals across the table like evidence of insanity, their faces mixing pity with professional skepticism. Then the forensic anthropologist went silent, her finger tracing the splint work in the photographs. Compound. Fracture stabilized with techniques she'd only seen in medieval texts. Impossible precision without modern tools. The mud casts they'd taken from around the hut showed handprints 18 inches across, weight distribution suggesting bipedal movement, depth indicating something over 800 pounds that moved with inexplicable gentleness. My sister touched my face with trembling hands, searching for the woman who'd left 4 years ago, finding instead someone who'd been unmade and rebuilt by wilderness itself. The therapists called it transformative trauma, but they couldn't explain the botanical knowledge I'd gained. 47 edible plants I'd never studied, water purification, methods from another age, survival wisdom that felt inherited rather than learned. I'd become a translation of something ancient, carrying messages in my bones that civilization had forgotten. The symbols carved into the hut's stones matched nothing in any database, yet I understood them perfectly. Gratitude, protection, continuity. One detective asked if I believed I'd been saved by Bigfoot. The words so small and ridiculous it made me laugh until I cried. I'd been saved by something that predated names, that chose compassion when it could have chosen indifference, that taught me survival was a collaboration between the lost and those who refused to let them disappear. They closed the case. As found alive, unknown circumstances, which felt appropriate for an experience that lived in the space between proof and faith. I kept one journal entry private, the final one, where I'd written simply, "Some things watch over us, not because we deserve it, but because mercy is their nature." I returned to the valley 6 months after they released me, carrying a woven basket I'd made during sleepless nights when my hands remembered skills my mind couldn't explain. Inside were honey, dried flowers, and a carving I'd worked for weeks. 2 figures, one small and broken, one enormous and sheltering. The hut stood exactly as I'd left it, stone walls holding 4 years of whispered prayers that something greater than loneliness existed in the wild places. I placed the offering at the entrance and spoke my gratitude to the wind, knowing words were unnecessary, but needing to voice them anyway for my own transformation. As I walked away, I felt that familiar presence, not watching but accompanying, the way ancient things move, alongside us in moments of profound change. I didn't turn around, understanding finally that some relationships exist beyond sight, that the most sacred encounters leave no photographs, only altered souls. The cameras I'd hidden captured nothing but shadows and light, exactly as I'd expected, and I destroyed the footage before reaching my car. Some evidence protects itself through absence. Some truths survive only when we stop demanding proof. But as I drove down the mountain, one image appeared in a single frame, a massive silhouette on the ridge, there and gone, like memory itself. I never went back, but something followed me forward, the certainty that mercy wears unexpected forms, that the wilderness still cradles those who fall, and that being saved sometimes means becoming the kind of person who understands why certain guardians choose to remain legend. The mystery wasn't what watched over me in those mountains. It was why I'd been deemed worthy of such ancient compassion. What would you do if rescue came from something beyond explanation? Subscribe to walk the line between the known and the sacred.